Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtota Siddha Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtota Siddha Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Charo Deshna Prabhu Marathon Ki Jai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Bhakti Vikasa Swami Swami. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Pre Vanchakalpa Trubhya Shakra Pasandubhi Eva Chapati Tanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminita Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagisha Yasya Vadane Lakshmi Yasya Chavaksasi Yasya Ste Hridaye Samvit Tamnasim Amaham Bhaje. So, Today is the auspicious day of Odana Shashti, and I'm just going to read a little bit about that before I start the class. So, Odana Shashti is a festival that marks the beginning of winter. During the Odana Shashti festival, the devotees dress Lord Jagannath and Balaram with starched cloth. This ceremony indicates that from that day forward, a winter covering should be given to the Lord. That covering is directly purchased from a weaver, and freshly purchased cloth is usually starched to preserve it. According to the Archana Marg, a cloth should first be washed to remove all the starch, and then it can be used to cover the Lord. On this occasion, by the desire of Lord Jagannath, his servants dress him in new starched clothes. Today in Rajapur, our Jagannath Baladev were wearing nice new starched cloth. They were sitting in their lavishly decorated altar. Each year the decorations are increasing more and more. This year the altar was appearing to be like a Vrindavan forest. The festival started with beautiful bhajans led by His Grace Kamal Gopal Prabhu. After the noon Bhoga Arti was offered to their lordships, the assembled Vaishnavas had the great opportunity to hear from a couple of great personalities. The first speaker was His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj, followed by His Grace Jananivas Prabhu. Jananivas Prabhu spoke about the great personality Pundarika Vidyanidhi and the pastime of him becoming critical of the Lord's servants. Sri Pundarika Vidyanidhi, a close associate of Lord Chaitanya's, once upon seeing that the deities were being offered starched garments, became critical towards the servants of Lord Jagannath. When Pundarika was thus speaking in this way, Swarup Damodar tried to explain that the characteristics of the Supreme Lord are beyond the jurisdiction of worldly etiquette, and encouraged Pundarika not to relinquish his critical thoughts. Swarup Damodar's advice fell on deaf ears, so Lord Jagannath and Balaram enacted the pastime of appearing to Pundarika in a dream that evening and slapping him on his cheeks. Thus Jagannath destroyed the sinful mentality of criticizing the behavior of the Supreme Lord's servants by his supreme mercy. Odana Shashti is also described in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Sri Gaurasundar, accompanied by all his devotees, came to see Lord Jagannath on Odana Shashti. Musical bands with numerous instruments, mridangas, conch shells, bells, etc., echoed all around, and the entire town wore a festive look. Their lordships wore many different sets of clothes that day, and the festival would last until the Makara Sankranti in mid-January. Sri Gaurasundar and the Vaishnavas stayed late into the night, gripped in waves of ecstasy, seeing Sri Jagannath's many changes of dress. The Supreme Lord, as the worshipper, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, worshipped himself in his deity form, Lord Jagannath. Unless the Lord blesses one cannot fathom this divine, esoteric mystery, which was now being played out. Upon the altar of the Supreme Lord, Sri Jagannath, in his wooden deity form, sat in yoga asana while he, as the crest jewel of all sannyasis, steeped in the mellows of bhakti yoga. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came for his own darshan. On the occasion of the Odana Shashti festival, the deities are colorfully dressed in the finest of silks and with beautiful golden jewelry inlaid with precious gems. Garlands, bracelets, and earrings, all made from fragrant seasonal flowers, further bedeck their lordships. Scented oils, incense, flowers, ghee lamps, and the 16 different items for special worship are offered to Lord Jagannath. Grand and opulent offerings of prasadam are also made continually. Sri Gaurahari observed these festivities with his devotees. Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antikanda 10. Okay, so that's a little bit about this festival, Odana Shashti, beginning of winter. And now we'll go to Srimad Bhagavatam. We're reading Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 11. Got it? Okay. So, Shyama Avadataha Shatapatra Lokanaha Pishanga Vastraha Suruchaha Supeshachaha Supeshasaha Sarve Chatuhu Bahavaha Unmishan Mani Praveka Nishka Abharanaha Su Varchasaha. What's the meter? Yeah, Shyama Vadata Shatapatra Lokana. Shyama Vadata Shatapatra Lokana. Pishanga Vastra Surucha Supeshasa. Pishanga Vastra Surucha Supeshasaha. Sarve Chaturbahava Unmishanmani. Sarve Chaturbahava Unmishanmani. Pravekanishka Paranasuvarchasaha. Pravekanishka Paranasuvarkashaha. Suvarchasaha. Shyamavatatas Shatapachalokana. Pishanga Vastra Surucha Supeshasaha. Sarve Chaturbahava Unmishanmani. Pravekanishka Baranasuvarchasaha. Shyamavadatas Shatapachalochanaha. Pishanga Vastra Surucha Supeshasaha. Sarve Chaturbahava Unmishanmani. Pravekanishka Baranasuvarchasaha. Please repeat. Shyamavadata Shatapachalokana. Matadis. Pishanga Vastra Surucha Supeshasaha. Sarve Chaturbahava Unmishanmani. Pravekanishka Paranakvarsasaha. Yes? Okay. Shyama sky bluish. Avadataha, glowing. Shatapatra, lotus flower. Lochanaha, eyes. Pishanga, yellowish. Vastraha, clothing. Suruchaha, greatly attractive. Supeshasaha, growing youthful. Sarve, all of them. Chatuhu, 4. Bahavaha, hands. Unmishan, rising luster. Mani, pearls. Praveka, superior quality. Nishkabaranaha, ornamental medallions. Suvarchasaha, effulgent. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets are described as having a glowing sky bluish complexion. Their eyes resemble lotus flowers, their dress is of a yellowish color, and their bodily features are very attractive. They're just the age of growing youths. They all have 4 hands. They are nicely decorated with pearl necklaces with ornamental medallions, and they all appear to be effulgent. Purport: the inhabitants in Vaikuntha Loka are all personalities with spiritual bodily features not to be found in the material world. We can find the descriptions in the revealed scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam. Impersonal descriptions of transcendence in the scriptures indicate that the bodily features in Vaikuntha Loka are never to be seen in any part of the universe, as there are different bodily features in different places of a particular planet, or as there are different bodily features between bodies in different planets. Similarly, the bodily features of the inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka are completely different from those in the material universe. For example, the 4 hands are distinct from the 2 hands in this world. So I already chanted Mangalarchanam, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. So this verse is obviously describing the features of the inhabitants of Vaikuntha. So as you can tell, they're much different from the features of the living entities on this planet, and they're even vastly superior in terms of beauty to the inhabitants of the highest material planets in this universe, which is really an unfathomable thing because, it's already said that the beauty of those inhabitants of the higher planets is so much more beautiful than even the most beautiful people on this planet that it makes them look like hogs. And then taking it a step further, those inhabitants of Vaikuntha are said to be that much more beautiful than the residents of the higher planets. So we already can't fathom how beautiful these residents of the higher planets are. So what to speak of how beautiful the residents of Vaikuntha are. And while they have all of this bodily beauty and, these decorations and they're effulgent and all these things, another important aspect of Vaikuntha that I'll go over in this class is the definition of Vaikuntha, which means no anxiety. Whereas contrasting, this material world is full of anxiety at every step. So I will kind of contrast the two and hopefully help illustrate how we can start making our way to a more of a Vaikuntha consciousness, hopefully, through the process of practicing devotional service. So one interesting sentence that Prabhupada has in this purport that I'm trying to wrap my head around is this: impersonal descriptions of transcendence in the scriptures indicate that the bodily features in Vaikuntha Loka are never to be seen in any part of the universe. So this reminded me, I was talking to Chandanacharya Prabhu about this, that the impersonalists, they can't understand that there is such a place as Vaikuntha in the spiritual world, and that there is that these bodily features can exist, and that the happiness you can derive from associating with the Lord and His pure devotees is so much greater than the happiness derived from this impersonal realization that's achieved with much more difficulty as well. And I've pulled up this quote it's originally from this Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, but it's quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita a few times. It's, "My dear Lord, O Master of the universe, since I have directly seen you, my transcendental bliss has taken the shape of a great ocean. Being situated in that ocean, I now realize all other so-called happiness to be like the water contained in the hoofprint of a calf." And the purport is that the transcendental bliss enjoyed in pure devotional service is like an ocean, whereas the material happiness and even the happiness to be derived from the realization of impersonal Brahman are just like the water in the hoofprint of a calf. And I find that interesting because it's also, that hoofprint of a calf analogy is used a few different ways. The other way it's used is that by practicing devotional service and taking shelter of a spiritual master, the ocean of samsara, this material ocean that we're trying to navigate over, shrinks down to the size of a hoofprint of calf. So it's used in multiple different ways, and I found that to be quite interesting. And then another thing that Prabhupada is saying in this purport is talking about the different bodily features within this planet and other planets are so variegated, and similarly, these bodily features of the residents of Vaikuntha are so much different than the ones here. What does he say exactly? As there are different bodily features in different places of a particular planet, or there are different bodily features between bodies in different planets. Similarly, the bodily features of the inhabitants of Vaikuntha are completely different from those in the material universe. So you can see it pretty easily. You just walk around outside a little bit and you see someone's like really, overweight, and then someone is like very skinny, someone's very short, very tall. Some people have very dark black skin, some people have very pale white skin. Just all kinds of different, variety just within the human race alone. What to speak of between different species on this planet. So how much more different should these residents of Vaikuntha look, and how beautiful they must be. It's really something we can't imagine. But just by hearing about these things and hearing about the descriptions of the spiritual world and the pure devotees, we can advance in Krishna consciousness. And this is the process of purifying our consciousness of material contamination, is by hearing these descriptions. And in that vein, I would like to just read a little bit. You can pull this up, Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15. Just pull up the index. I'm going to read some of the translations, starting at text 14. 3, 15, 14. Yeah. And I'm just going to read the translation. So, okay. I'm going to read a few. So, in the Vaikuntha planets, all the residents are similar in form to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They all engage in devotional service to the Lord without desires for sense gratification. In the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through the Vedic literature. He is full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. In those Vaikuntha planets, there are many forests which are very auspicious. In those forests, the trees are desire trees, and in all seasons they are filled with flowers and fruits, because everything in the Vaikuntha planets is spiritual and personal. In the Vaikuntha planets, the inhabitants fly in their airplanes, accompanied by their wives and consorts, and eternally sing of the character and activities of the Lord, which are always devoid of all inauspicious qualities. While singing the glories of the Lord, they deride even the presence of the blossoming Madhavi flowers, which are fragrant and laden with honey. When the king of bees hums in a high pitch, singing the glories of the Lord, there is a temporary lull in the noise of the pigeon, the cuckoo, the crane, the chakravaka, the swan, the parrot, the partridge, and the peacock. Such transcendental birds stop their own singing simply to hear the glories of the Lord. Although flowering plants like the mandara, kunda, kurabaka, utpala, champaka, arna, punaga, Nagakeshara, Bakula, lily, and Parijata are full of transcendental fragrance, they are still conscious of the austerities performed by Tulasi, for Tulasi is given special preference by the Lord, who garlands himself with Tulasi leaves. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha travel in their airplanes made of lapis lazuli, emerald, and gold. Although crowded by their consorts who have large hips and beautiful smiling faces, they cannot be stimulated to passion by their mirth and beautiful charms. The ladies in the Vaikuntha planets are as beautiful as the goddess of fortune herself. Such transcendently beautiful ladies, their hands playing with lotuses and their leg bangles tinkling, are sometimes seen sweeping the marble walls, which are bedecked at intervals with golden borders, in order to receive the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The goddesses of fortune worship the Lord in their own gardens by offering tulsi leaves on the coral-paved banks of transcendental reservoirs of water. While offering worship to the Lord, they can see on the water the reflection of their beautiful faces with raised noses, and it appears that they have become more beautiful because of the Lord's kissing their faces. It is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the description of the Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuntha and take to talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance. So, a couple of points I'd like to cover from that. One is that this point about let's see. Right. That the inhabitants travel in their airplanes, and they're crowded by their consorts who have large hips and beautiful smiling faces, but they cannot be stimulated to passion by their mirth and beautiful charms. So this, to me, is really mind-blowing, because there's so much in pure Krishna consciousness that there's no thought of even trying to enjoy on their own separately. And as we discussed, I said at the very beginning of the class, these women there are so much more beautiful than we can even comprehend. So, if we are attracted by the beauty of a woman in this world, imagine how much more we would be attracted if we saw one of these women. So I was listening to a lecture by His Holiness Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj about this, and he was saying that for these residents of Vaikuntha, it doesn't even occur to them to enjoy on their own. It's not even possible. Their mind is so attracted and so fixed on devotion to Krishna and making Krishna enjoy, helping Krishna to enjoy, that it's not even a possibility for them to think of that. So it really kind of woke me up to how much progress I have left to make. I haven't made any progress, and there's so much more to go to reach that level of pure devotional service. Another interesting point in this passage is that this text 18, the king of bees hums in a high pitch, singing the glories of the Lord, and there's a temporary lull in the noise of the pigeon, cuckoo, the crane, the other birds. These transcendental birds stop their own singing to hear the glories of the Lord. Another thing I heard from His Holiness Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj in a lecture was that everything in Vaikuntha is kirtan. So all of the sounds of all the animals and just every noise that's happening is actually glorification of Krishna. Whereas in this world, pretty much everything, 99.99% of sound vibration is not that. It's glorification of ourselves, or pursuing sense gratification in some way. He made the nice comparison of how birds in this material world, the sounds they make are for attracting a mate. So it's eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Mostly mating is the reason for the sounds that we make. We speak sweet words and all these things just to try to get some sense gratification. Let's see. Another thing that I was contemplating when I read this verse was that these residents of Vaikuntha have these beautiful qualities, but it's also the case that pure devotees, even when they're manifesting pastimes in the material world, they also have very beautiful qualities. It's described a lot in the Bhagavatam. I believe Uddhava was described to have looked very much similar to Krishna, if not just like him. And the residents of Vrindavan, they had similar bodily qualities to Krishna. Then Shukadev Goswami is another one. Let me read a little description of that. I think I have it here. Yeah, so when Shukadev Goswami appears in the Bhagavatam at the end of the first canto, there's a description, and this was actually one of the first classes I sat in when I joined last year. So I'll just read some of these translations as well. You don't have to pull them up, it'll be quick. This son of Vyasadeva was only 16 years old. His legs, hands, thighs, arms, shoulders, forehead, and the other parts of his body were all delicately formed. His eyes were beautifully wide, and his nose and ears were highly raised. He had a very attractive face, and his neck was well formed and beautiful like a conch shell. His collarbone was fleshy, his chest broad and thick, his navel deep, and his abdomen beautifully striped. His arms were long, and curly hair was strewn over his beautiful face. He was naked, and the hue of his body reflected that of Lord Krishna. He was blackish and very beautiful due to his youth. Because of the glamour of his body and his attractive smiles, he was pleasing to women. Though he tried to cover his natural glories, the great sages present there were all expert in the art of physiognomy, and so they honored him by rising from their seats. So you can see that even the pure devotee of the Lord that's in the material world has these beautiful qualities. And then another thing I remember when I first joined was there was some description, I didn't find the exact one, but of, about Srila Prabhupada and how beautiful he was. And that I just found this description online that of Satsvarup Das Goswami, and I'll read that a little bit because it's also pretty nice to reflect on. So he says, Sri Krishna is handsomeness and waves of nectar of handsomeness. This is from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. But Srila Prabhupada was 70 or 80 years old. We were all young men, so why were we attracted to this old man? Srila Prabhupada used to say, I'm an old man, I may die at any moment, and I am a poor foreigner, why are they after me? He had the attractive features of a sage, the way he sat, the shape of his head, the gestures of his hands. He was from the east, like Gautama Buddha. He sat on the floor or on the ground, and whatever furniture he had was at a low center of gravity, no chairs. The aura and look in his eyes was from another world. You can't describe it, his shining eyes. His eyes signaled, you can look in my eyes, but you will not be able to understand my love of Krishna. But that's what's there. He was childlike also, very sweet but very strong. You couldn't come before him like a rogue and a rascal and still approach him. You had to accept that he was an elderly person, a guru, and you must be respectful to him, and then things could happen. Then you could begin to perceive his actual beauty. He would relax and allow himself to be taken care of by you in exchange with you. And continuing on this line, just by having the good fortune of having some personal association with my own Guru Maharaj, it's another example of observing this beauty. It's really not describable because it's not material beauty that we're used to chasing after. And you wouldn't usually use the word beauty to describe an older man, especially, it's not typically something that you'd think of an old man being beautiful, but when it's a pure devotee, they just exhibit these beautiful qualities that are undeniable. They have an effulgence to them, and they have, it's just their bodily features take on this beauty that is undeniable. And even just, among each other, I noticed, for example, when I was out on book distribution with Motsa Prabhu, we were at the Indian store, and just looking at him and then looking at the people coming out of the store that we were trying to give books to, there's a stark difference, and it's not even so much just like bodily beauty as it is just this color. Like it's like he has a bunch of color, and then all these people are like very black and white and gray, and they look like they're, just completely covered by the modes of material nature, whereas he's effulgent and he has like this, there's just this vibrance to him. So this is something you can practically observe if you just look at devotees and then you go out and distribute books and you're just looking at these people, and you can see how the Lord imbibes his devotees with these qualities of beauty. So now I wanted to kind of move on and move into contrasting this material world with Vaikuntha. And like I said at the beginning of class, these inhabitants of Vaikuntha, they're actually completely free from this anxiety, and they're free from the pursuit of sense gratification. Whereas almost everyone in this world is just completely full of anxiety and full of the pursuit of sense gratification, 100% engaged in those things. And as you're on book distribution, like I just mentioned, you really start to see these things manifest. You start to see that everything someone is doing is after that sense gratification. And when you try to get some of their money to give them books, they're very reluctant to give it up because they were going to use that money for sense gratification. So it becomes a battle that you're in, that people are just so eager to dismiss what we're doing and to just ignore us even, whereas we're giving them the solution to all their problems, but they're so covered and they're so absorbed in their anxiety and sense gratification that they're not willing to stop and hear it, or they're just not able to. Another thing that I heard my Guru Maharaj speak in regards to this was that you can easily see how absorbed people are when you put a mirror somewhere. The people are completely absorbed in themselves. If you put a big mirror, and that's why one of the reasons we don't have like big mirrors, and like we have a tiny little mirror for putting on T-lock, and but he said, especially in the West, this is the case, that people have big mirrors and they'll spend an hour or more just like combing their hair, looking in the mirror, and they're not actually doing anything. They're not accomplishing anything with that. Nobody other than themselves can even tell any difference, but they are basically just doing it to be able to look at themselves and say, look how beautiful I am, this is amazing, right? Whereas we discussed before, these residents of Vaikuntha, they're so absorbed in pleasing Krishna that they have no thought of, I'm beautiful, look, my wife is beautiful, whatever. They're just completely focused on Krishna, and they get these beautiful qualities as a result. Another funny thing that my Guru Maharaj said in that class was that you can really understand the power of Maya when you realize that people like smelling their own farts. It's completely, amazing, because nobody else wants to smell it, but then everybody likes to smell their own farts. So that's, really amazing how powerful Maya is to be able to do that. So we love looking at ourselves, we love smelling ourselves, we love like hearing from ourselves. We want to be glorified. All these things need to be rooted out at the root through devotional service, and replaced with wanting to satisfy Krishna, wanting to look at Krishna, wanting to smell, the flowers offered to Krishna, wanting to taste prasadam that's been offered to Krishna. We replace all these things with Krishna at the center, and we get rid of that anxiety and that pursuit of sense gratification that is just leading us to hellish condition of life. And another interesting thing that, again, my Guru Maharaj said, was that, you can see proof of this Vaikuntha consciousness and this Krishna consciousness in India when you go around and you just simply see that there's so many temples that exist that have been there for thousands of years, whereas there's no houses almost that have been there for that long. So what that tells you is that people were building opulent houses for the Lord and temples for the Lord to go and worship Krishna, whereas for their own living quarters they didn't care so much. They would just create something that's sufficient for them to live in. They didn't make these opulent mansions and stuff that you see today. Whereas you almost see the opposite, where all the churches even are getting completely abandoned and just torn down and neglected, and people are just focused on building the biggest possible house for themselves and their family. So the opposite of that was happening, and you can see the proof of it. It's pretty interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you can just see all these old temples as proof that back then they had more regard for building an opulent house for the Lord than they did for pleasing their own senses with their own living quarters and creating something opulent for themselves. Let's see. So, like I said, this Vaikuntha, it's, everyone is completely engaged in pure devotional service there. And there's no more suffering, there's eternal joy. And yeah, everyone is completely fixated on Krishna. So what do we really need to do in this world to get closer to that? Because ultimately we want to be happy, and we all want to be free of anxiety. And we know philosophically now that the way to do that is to devote ourselves to Krishna and engage in pure devotional service. So there's a couple of things that we need to do. One is obviously hear and chant about the Lord, which is what's happening continuously in Vaikuntha. And let's see, sorry. Before I get to that point, one thing I wanted to mention was these people in the material world, even if they are pious and engaged in the mode of goodness, it's talked about in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam that there are people that they engage in these fruitive activities in the mode of goodness in order to enhance their sense gratification. So this is a trick it's a trap that you can fall into if you're not in proper association and you're not in the proper consciousness, is that, well, I have all of these tools in front of me, the Vedic literatures and all these different yagyas I can perform and fruitive activities I can do, and I can go up to the heavenly planets like I described before. They're so much more beautiful there. Why not go there, enjoy? I don't have to surrender to Krishna yet. I can just go there and enjoy. And Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, text 20, Krishna says, Travidyamam soma pavputa papa yagnyer ishvasvar gatim pratayante te punyamasaraya surindra lokam ashnanti divyan divideva bhogan. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. The next text, Te tam bhuktva svarga lokam vishalam, kshine punya martya lokam vishanti, evam chayi dharmam anuprapana, gata gatam kama kama labhante. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. And then, of course, the famous verse after that, Ananyas chintayanto mam, ye janaf parupasate, tesham nechabi yuktanam yoga kshimam bahamyaham, that those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So this is where Krishna is giving the solution to this. He's saying, don't do this, don't go this way and try to go to the heavenly planets and enjoy there, because you're only going to get repeated birth and death. Just worship me with exclusive devotion and I'll carry everything that you need. And of course, at the end of the chapter, he goes on, Man mana bhava mad bhakto, madhyaji mam namaskaru, mam evashashi yukta vaivam atmanama prayanaha. That engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer me obeisances, and you'll surely come to me, by being completely absorbed in me in that way. So this is the solution to this. We don't want to fall into this trap of using the Vedas to enhance our sense gratification and thinking, oh, well, I can go to the higher planets and, I can become a pure devotee later. Maybe some other life I'll do it. Maybe when I go up to the higher planets, I can do it there. No, it's very clearly said in Shastra that this is the best opportunity we have, especially now. This obviously labdva surdulabham idam bahu sambhavante manusham anityam apiha manusham artadam anityam pihadiraha turnam yatita napateda numitu yavan nishayasai vishayada kalu sarvatasyat. That this, having attained this rare human form of life, one should immediately engage in devotional service, because these sense gratification that we're after is available in the forms of hogs and dogs, and Krishna consciousness is only available for a human being. So we have this rare opportunity, but on top of that, we need to constantly meditate on the fact that we've been so lucky to find this place and find Krishna consciousness and find Srila Prabhupada's movement and find Srila Prabhupada's books, because these are books written by a pure devotee, and, we're so lucky that he's come to the West, translated all these into English from a language that we never would have been able to understand. We never would have even heard of the Bhagavad Gita or Krishna probably if it weren't for him. So we need to understand that opportunity, understand that we're in the golden age of Lord Chaitanya, and that, all we have to do is engage in chanting, dancing, feasting, distributing books, going on Harinam, building farms. It's very simple things actually when it comes down to it. We just have to engage in these things day in and day out and let ourselves experience the bliss of it and surrender to the process. Understand by seeing other people that have done it, and you can look at, your spiritual master, you can look at, all these devotees that have done it, you can look at Srila Prabhupada and just realize that what they're telling is the real thing, and that they're not, it's not some form of speculation or anything. They're experiencing what they're saying. They're experiencing pure Krishna consciousness, and the descriptions of it being completely full of bliss, eternal, just you become full of knowledge, and when you get this, you want to spread it to everyone else. These are all very promising things that we should focus on the goal, and we should go towards that. So not only are we in this human form of life, but we're in this human form of life in a very rare time as well, right after the appearance of Lord Chaitanya and right after the appearance of Srila Prabhupada. So there's almost, nothing in our way. There's no obstacles actually. It's just up to us and getting over our own minds. Basically, is what it comes down to. Following the orders of the Guru and just staying steady on the path. And then I had a whole bit about how to have Vaikuntha on earth. This another lecture that my Guru Maharaj gave is make the earth Vaikuntha or something like that it was called. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it again comes down to the simple program that we have. Distribute books, build farms, stay associated with the devotees, engage in the different aspects of devotional service, hear chants about Krishna, take prasadam. It's a very simple thing. And one thing I was thinking of is that this place, Krishna Life, is kind of, I've heard it described as before, like any temple is this way. It's an embassy of Vaikuntha. So similarly to how if you're on the U.S. embassy in I don't know, where, France or something, I think it's technically U.S. soil, right? If you're on that property. So similarly, this is like a Vaikuntha bubble that we're in. And you can really feel that when you go out on book distribution, that you go outside the bubble and it just you still kind of have your own bubble, if you're fixed up in Krishna consciousness. So you're not in Maya completely necessarily. I mean, I am, but the devotees that go out on books aren't. But you have this protection here, and you have this shelter of the Lord and the devotees that is very rare and very precious and should be taken full advantage of. Devotees should spend as much time here as they can. If they're going to college and stuff, they should be able to come here as often as possible, because it really will recharge your batteries and give you what you're yearning after. We're looking for that sense of community, that sense of happiness that we get here. And the other thing is that this is, speaking of no anxiety in Vaikuntha, in my experience being here, there's a lot less anxiety than being in the material world. There's still some, whatever, because I'm not completely purified, but the anxiety levels completely reduce like they reduce to an extreme extent when you start living in the temple. And any anxiety you do have is in terms of your service. So like maybe you're anxious about, I didn't do enough books, or how we're going to, make more devotees and all these kinds of things. But that's completely transcendental, and that's actually a good form of anxiety, because while in Vaikuntha there's no anxiety, in Goloka Vrindavan there is anxiety. So it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing, but material anxiety is no longer so prominent. If anything, it's just your own mind that you're dealing with. Another thing I wanted to almost end with is this purport that I was just reading through the other day. 293. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. At the end of 293. It's just, you don't have to pull it up. It's just a small paragraph. But a poor man without any employment or occupation may undergo so many troubles in life, but if by chance the same man gets a good service under the government, he at once becomes happy. There is no profit in denying the supremacy of the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, but one should be constitutionally situated in one's own glory, namely to be situated in the pure consciousness of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. So it's a similar, it's a great analogy that and I've also heard this, that, we've forgotten that our Father is a very rich man, and we're out in this world just suffering as a beggar, basically. Whereas all we have to do is just go back home and turn to our Father and ask for shelter, and He'll give us complete shelter and everything we need, and much more. Our Krsna is like the richest person. He's actually the owner of all the wealth, and by taking shelter of Him, we can actually just experience that full shelter, and we don't have any anxiety about our needs being taken care of and how we're going to get by. So similarly, this is an analogy of a man that's unemployed, and he just goes to the government and gets a nice job there, and then he's completely taken care of. So we just have to become employed by the Lord and this Sankirtan movement, distribute books, build farms, and go on Harinam, make more devotees, and everything is guaranteed for us. No more anxiety, no more worries in life. So I'll end my class there. If there's any corrections, comments, questions, please. Really? Okay. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.